This podcast is brought to you by AudioHook, the leading independent audio DSP. AudioHook has direct publisher integrations into all major podcast and streaming radio platforms, providing 40% more inventory than what could be accessed in omnichannel DSPs. What's more, AudioBook has full transcripts on more than 90% of all podcast inventory, enabling advanced contextual targeting and brand suitability. AudioHook is so confident that in addition to CPM buys, they offer the industry's only pay-for-performance option where brands can scale audio and podcasting with peace of mind knowing they are only paying for outcomes. Visit audiohook.com to learn more. That's audiohook.com.
Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTech God. Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your go-to for conversations with leaders in the CTV space. Today we have Moe Chughtai, the Global Vice President at MIQ. Moe has been in the industry for years, having worked at companies like TubeMogul, which was acquired by Adobe in 2016. He mentors, he's on the Committee of Advanced TV at the IAB, and he advises various companies in the space. I've heard great things about Moe. Although I stiffed him with a bar tab nearly 2 years ago, he still has no idea who I am. So Moe, I'm really excited to have you here, and welcome to the AdTech God Pod.
I love that. Thanks so much for having me. And I got to tell you, I'm still waiting for you to pay that back. So one of these days.
You're never getting it back. Thanks for the drink. It was great. It was top shelf. Moe, thank you for being here. And thanks again for your partnership in the past. I know that we've worked with MIQ across the advertising forum. Thanks for all the support.
Yeah, look, we love what you guys are doing. I've been a big fan of you for a very long time, you know, back from the Twitter days where it was just the account. So I love all the things you're doing. It's so cool to see it flourish into this, you know, this big sort of company, right, that you guys are putting together. It's awesome.
Thank you, Moe. Your background's really impressive. I know that you were part of the acquisition of TubeMogul by Adobe. Can you take it back? How did you get into the industry, and what led you up to being a vice president at MIQ today?
Yeah. So I might even take it further back than that. I always start like my intro on, I'm the child of immigrants. We moved to the US when I was young. That experience colors the way I see the world and kind of everything I do. So I'm just always incredibly grateful for the opportunities I've been given kind of along the way. But on the advertising side specifically, when I went to school, I went in looking for a degree in medicine and somehow came out the other side with a marketing degree. You know, I was interested. I took a 201 class as an elective, and it just kind of clicked. And after college, you know, I spent a little bit of time in the nonprofit sector, helping children with really difficult immigration cases get some legal help. Spent a little bit of time as a teacher. That was really because my public speaking skills at the time were just not it. And look, there's just no better way to improve your public speaking than to try to hold the attention of a class of 17-year-olds. You know, that's sort of where I was. And eventually I found my way into advertising, working for a startup at the time, TubeMogul, which was an early video DSP. You know, one of the first to bring like ESPN's online service online with advertising, right? So that's how far back that is. You know, worked there for a couple of years, went through the Adobe acquisition, you know, worked there for a little bit, and then moved on to MIQ. But in that time, I've done kind of every job in the books in advertising. I've done media trading, I've done some sales gigs, account management, data science, and product management. You know, I've kind of done a little bit of everything. And so now I manage our advanced TV and video business at MIQ, which is, you know, sort of the largest, fastest growing product line for the business, working with agencies, working with partners to build really insanely exciting, innovative things in the video space.
So you were part of an acquisition, a pretty sizable one in the video space as part of the TubeMogul acquisition. And now MIQ is heavy in the video space as well. What do you think you learned moving from what is a massive company like Adobe into what was, when you joined, probably a much smaller, more nimble MIQ?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined MIQ, we were maybe 200 people. I think we're about 1,500 globally now. So
right. That's
over the course of 8 years. So you've seen, you know, I've seen sort of that transition from a relatively small size company to a mid-sized company. I think the big thing that get excited about in that transition is there's just so much pace, so much growth, so much kind of innovation that happens at that stage. When I joined, our founder, Gorman, was taking, even at 200 people, every single new hire, he would interview individually himself. And that's something that really stood out to me, right? Like I've always been someone who values a personal connection with the leaders that I'm working for. It's really important for me actually to feel like the person on the other line cares about me and I care about them and we're building something together. That's something that stood out in that interview process. And it's been something that as MIQ's grown, I've always appreciated is we haven't sort of lost that piece. That was something that TubeMogul did really well as well under, Brett Wilson's leadership and kind of the crew there. Jeremy and I worked together at TubeMogul, and I always say it's one of the best sort of entry points that anyone could have had into advertising. It was such an innovative culture, but just good people, right? People that you would want to hang out with outside of work. And it's just so important.
I don't think that there's anything better than a culture that at a company where people have personal relationships with each other. There's nothing worse really than having an executive walk by and you're just a stranger on the street as you're sitting at your desk working with them or standing in a conference room with them.
It's insane.
And that culture is important. It is insane. It's not a healthy culture to do that. Like they're people just like us and we're people just like them. So I love that you guys have that type of personal touch.
I just got married 5 months ago now. And, we had a wedding of 100 people in New York and New Jersey, actually. And of the 100 people, about 10 were from TubeMogul Adobe and about, 20 were from MIQ and sort of partners. And so you work at places long enough, you like people enough, and they sort of become family.
I agree. I think a lot of my closest friends work in the space too, and our former colleagues or partners in some way. We partnered, we became friends, and we continue to work together in some capacity now. For you, Moe, you work in the space. MIQ has grown substantially since you've joined. Where are you seeing things trending? Like where are things heading for the space, for streaming, for video, from your perspective and where you sit?
Yeah, it's so interesting, man. When I first started, this kind of video and TV business at MIQ, we were still doing a lot of education around what was possible with streaming. And I remember the very first presentation that I put together was like, you're thinking of CTV as this kind of like unique, distant, alien format that's like TV. What is it doing on a media plan when you're buying display and kind of all these other things? But if you think about it, it's traded the same exact way as the rest of your media buy, right? It's you log into a DSP, you have audience segments, you're trading, in the same kind of platforms. And there was a lot of education that we were doing, not just with clients, but internal teams also on like, this is today, this isn't tomorrow. And I think the transition over time has been, we went from like education about the opportunity to like helping marketers understand that, audiences were starting to see CTV as the primary platform, not just another platform that they were using, right? So I would say early COVID days, it was all about, how do you share shift from TV into streaming and connected TV? And I think the place that we're at now, which I'm so excited about, is we're kind of beyond that sort of messy middle where brands are just trying to figure out kind of what is their streaming strategy? Is it a big part? Is it a small part? Like where does linear fit? And, the conversations that we have today with our agency partners and our brand partners are, here's an objective that I have for the business. It's a new product launch. Here's an audience that I want to reach. And what is your total video strategy for that audience? Which, by the way, like total video it's linear, it's streaming, but it's also platforms like YouTube that like weirdly get sort of lost in the dialogue, I think sometimes. But, it's the biggest video platform in the internet. And it also includes, and I think this is something that I'm talking more and more about, social video as well, right? Which is about 60% of time spent on social now is video. And social is very quickly becoming a video first platform. And so when we talk to brands about, video now, we're talking about everything video and just going, how do you empower planning, discovery, audiences, measurement across all of those worlds?
You talk about various platforms. You talk about omni-channel, programmatic. What really sets you guys apart as it relates to maybe like the data and the algorithm and the measurement in the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the big thing that we tend to talk about is how do you bring these different worlds together? As in, if you talk to any large brand, they are doing, all of these things, right? They're doing streaming, they're doing YouTube, they're doing, they're buying a lot of Meta and TikTok. And most brands are kind of back on TikTok as well. But most of those things have sat in silo the way linear and streaming kind of sat in silo, let's say 5 years ago. And so the conversation that we have with brands is, how do you bring that together? So we've built some interesting tech. We're a services business. We don't shy away from that. That's one of the things that really makes it stand out is we're really clear about our positioning in the market. We're here to help marketers execute campaigns that deliver outstanding performance for them. But the way we do that is we're tech enabled. And so we've built technology that sits on top of all these platforms that allows us to manage audiences across the different parts of your buy, across social, linear, streaming, YouTube, manage planning, do optimizations, frequency capping sort of across these different worlds, and then do the reporting and measurement in sort of one unified way. So that really, at the end of the day, a marketer is, of course, it's transparent. You're seeing all of those different aspects work together, but you should be able to lift and shift your strategy between different worlds, in sort of a much more seamless way than marketers generally do today.
That was actually my next question that was popping into my head as you were speaking. We know that linear is still a massive business. There's no doubt about that. Still a huge part of the pie. But we know that streaming is really ramping up. I have a prediction, by the way.
Love that.
Streaming will only accelerate in a downward economic cycle. We saw this in 2008. We saw print start to flutter. We saw digital really start to spike because it's more measurable. It's easier to buy and sometimes even more cost effective. How do you speak to advertisers about how planning should be thought of and executed, and what's the smartest way, in your opinion? It doesn't have to be something that applies to all clients, but what's the smartest way to really balance that reach and engagement across linear and CTV and social? Because there's just so much out there.
Totally. I mean, it is a lot for sure. And it's a lot really for any team, any individual team sometimes to manage. And so I think just from a planning perspective, to address your question, what we tend to find works really well with brands is starting with the data. It's about the end consumer at the end of the day, right? It's about reaching the right audience, and that's sort of influenceable with the message that you have to deliver. And so a lot of the work that we do is, how do you map an audience across all of these different ecosystems using all of the great data that's out in the world today? And so an early example of that, we were probably one of the earlier ones in the space, but an early example of that was using data set from smart TV screens, ACR data, to link linear and CTV together. That just allowed a brand to go, all of that data is tied to an internet connection because your smart TV is a computer these days. And so it allowed a brand to go, let me input my first party audience and let me spit out a plan across these worlds. What we've done over time is add additional data sets to that. So here's a data set that it, peeks into the Google, YouTube ecosystem. Here's the data set that peeks into the social ecosystem, and put all those together and just put the data in front of a marketer and go, look, I'm not trying to sell you one way or the other. I'm a neutral kind of third party here, but here's what your audience consumes and how they spend their time. And the average consumer in the US spends 6.5 hours a day on video. So it is the most influential channel for them. It's just, overlaying your audience against that and going, well, actually 20% of their time is on, Meta and TikTok, right? 10% is on YouTube, 20% is on streaming, rest is on linear. And does your plan reflect that?
Awesome. Where do you think we're going to see the most growth in the next 12 to 18 months? Whether it's in the streaming space or the data and measurement space, where do you think we're heading in the next year and a half?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I love your prediction, by the way. Streaming is going to do better in the recession. It's just more addressable and actionable and accountable than other formats. I think we've seen that with some of the recent IPO news and sort of M&A news around performance TV with a few of the folks in the space. I just think there's tremendous opportunity there that's not fully realized. So I think you're right. When marketers are sort of in a pinch, they tend to go towards kind of more addressable, more accountable formats. I think that's pretty exciting for us. And then I think from a tactical perspective, there's a couple of big trends that we're really excited about. I mean, I feel like the AI bit has been everyone kind of talks about it, but the areas that I'm most keen on in that world are, how do you use kind of assistants or agents in the workflow for a seller and a trader? And so, the areas that we're focused on are, how do you use AI for sales enablement? I mean, this, from your kind of background, there's just so much complexity in the advertising ecosystem, the ad tech ecosystem. It's unreasonable, I think, to expect a great seller to have a deep understanding on every piece of technology and have great people skills and relationships and all this stuff. And so, AI for sales enablement, where you can sort of ask questions and you got deep documentation kind of backing that.
It's one of the biggest challenges. If you speak to anyone who runs an ops team, you have a sales guy that's excited and doing his job and trying to secure money for the company. And he's being hit with all types of requests from these advertisers. I mean, a lot of times they know, and a lot of times they don't know. And being able to just easily pull up some sort of chat GPT of the company. Can this client target by this inventory type in this particular geo? We want only 4 zip codes. We want to target only automotive enthusiasts in Ferrari. Oh yeah, you get 6 impressions, and it's easy to digest and quick. I mean, that could be pretty massive for a sales org to be able to have that at their fingertips.
Huge. I think this is a big unlock, and an area that we're really excited about. This is when we talk about like tech-enabled service. This is what we're talking about, right? How do we use tech to make our people smarter so they can help customers sort of achieve the outcome that they're looking for? On the kind of trading side, we're building sort of similar tech that's like, here's the platform best practices. If you're thinking about sort of campaign setup, audience, kind of facilitation, sort of all that. The trouble is, we talk about fragmentation in CTV. I talk a lot about fragmentation of the different platforms that you need to buy if you're going to run an effective CTV campaign across the US, even just the US, right? Let alone, global markets. You've got to run at least in 3 platforms, and likely you've got to run at least in 5. And so the trouble is, all of the work that goes into campaign setups, reporting, kind of all this stuff, it just needs tech to be able to ease that. And so that's sort of the other area that we're spending a lot of time. We've built some planning tech around TV intelligence that helps do the kind of planning before campaign launches. But then we've got a ton of kind of AI stuff on the campaign and audience facilitation front.
Yeah, I feel like what is it coined now? Is it called a meta DSP? Is what people are calling it. It's all API driven. It's plugged into one UI. Reporting is in one UI, but you can buy everywhere from, Meta to, every other source of inventory that you want. I feel like maybe that's a direction that is really good, because people love the DSPs in market, right? They love the basis. They love the trade desk. They love all these other DSPs, StackAdapt, anybody else. But I think the hard part is you need more than one. And as an agency and as a trader, like, you have to be trained pretty well across these DSPs to understand everything that they do. But having it in one UI, to me, feels like probably the future.
100%. And my only build on that, because I agree with you, my only build on that would be, it might not even be a UI, right? The way we traditionally see it. Like, I just think about what is the best interface to talk to a user? This is my product hat back on. If I'm running campaigns, what's the interface that's going to help me kind of get things done fastest? And the interface that I think about is like, you're talking to something, maybe there's an agent on the background and that's doing the work for you. That stuff, I mean, it starts to become like Jarvis really quickly. I mean, I think that's maybe where that's headed.
Awesome. What keeps you in the space, Mo? We've worked in ad tech for quite some time now. What keeps you motivated to stay in ad tech, to keep pushing forward with the growth at MIQ? What's that driver for you?
I mean, it's an exciting space. Like, there's so many things that are going on at once in the space. It's competitive. It moves fast. It's collaborative sort of at the same time. You're often sort of competing and collaborating, with a ton of companies in the space. I just think that makes for really interesting work that you can do. And I also think, like, when you've been in the industry for a little while, you start to notice some like cycles that the industry goes through, and you can start to kind of get ahead of some of those. One of those, that I think about right now is this cycle around walled gardens and open web, for example, which is such a hotly debated topic. I think the part of the cycle that we're headed on that is I think collaboration is starting to be the future, even in that world, right? Like the walls are starting to come down a little bit on the big platforms. You've seen the Amazons, the YouTube of the world sort of open up a little bit. And I just think, there's a little bit of a maturity that's, this is a side quest that I'm going on a little bit, but like, I think the maturity that the advertising space is starting to develop around, like, it's not an us versus them. It's a, how do we work together to solve problems for the end marketer, who, by the way, like neither the marketer nor the consumer cares about open versus walled, right? So, it's sort of just a new kind of paradigm. Back to your question about what keeps me motivated, hungry, excited, is there are these problems, right? There are these kind of paradigm shifts, and, excitement is like 50% of the battle. Like you need energy to bring to big problems like that. And I get really excited about that personally.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me, and even though am I technically out? Am I out now? I don't even know anymore. I'm out, yet I'm so like dialed in to everything that's happening all the time, which is sometimes a problem. I think the change is addictive. We get frustrated by it, like how much change happens on a weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, whether it's regulation or just consumer habits, but it's not boring. Like if you think about it, like this doesn't change. Someone who's doing paperwork for, buying a house or a real estate agent, the job is very monotonous. It's you go, you show the house, you fill out the paperwork, you push it to, a loan company, they fill out the documents, they get you approved, and here's your loan and you're funded. Yes, the paperwork changes slightly, but the process doesn't change. For us, the entire buying process could change. The devices change, the measurement changes. And for me, I just think it's fun. It's like you always have to be on your toes. You have to read a lot and you have to network a lot, but it's fun to me.
Love that.
Well, Mo, I wanted to thank you for being here today, and thank you again for all your support over the years. You've been a great anonymous friend, I guess.
Listen, I'm gonna get that drink back one day. I know this, and I'm holding that up.
I'll put it on the Marketecture card.
There you go. Love it. Well, hey, listen, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a delight. And I'm so excited about the work you guys are doing. And I know we'll do more stuff together in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mo. Speak soon.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTech God Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on the latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.